The waitress watched her son correct a famous linguist at the festival, speaking a language that died 2,000 years ago. She didn't know the vampire king in the shadows recognized every word, or that he'd spent 3 millennia waiting to hear that ancient tongue spoken again. The coffee machine hissed for the 100th time that afternoon, and Leora Chun wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. The Cultural Heritage Festival had turned the city park into a maze of colorful tents, each one bursting with music, artifacts, and the kind of intellectual energy that made her feel both fascinated and exhausted. "Mom, can I go look at the book tent?" Evan tugged at her apron, his dark eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm only a 10-year-old could maintain after 6 hours at a festival. "Stay where I can see you," Leora said, pouring another latte for a woman in a flowing scarf. "And don't touch anything expensive." Evan grinned and darted toward the massive white tent adjacent to their cafe booth. Through the opening, Leora could see rows of glass cases displaying ancient manuscripts, their pages yellow with age. Her son had always been drawn to old things, languages especially. Last month, he taught himself basic hieroglyphics from a library book. The month before that, it was Sanskrit. She'd stopped being surprised. Her late husband, Marcus, had been the same way. A brilliant man who died in a car accident when Evan was only 3, leaving behind boxes of journals filled with languages she couldn't read, and a son who seemed to have inherited every bit of his genius. The afternoon crowd began to thin as the keynote speaker took the stage, Professor Jonathan Vance, according to the banner. Leora had heard whispers about him all day. Celebrated linguist, Yale professor, author of 5 books on dead languages. He stood behind the podium, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of confident smile that came from decades of being the smartest person in every room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance's voice boomed through the speakers, "today I will share something extraordinary. A language lost to time itself, the Dawn tongue." Leora's hands stilled on the espresso machine. Something cold brushed against the back of her neck, though the afternoon was warm. Vance continued, his voice rising with theatrical flair. "For 20 years, I've studied fragments of this dialect, piecing together sounds that haven't been spoken in over 2,000 years. Listen." He began to recite something, words that rolled and clicked in strange patterns like water over stones. The crowd leaned forward, captivated. Leora found herself listening too, though she couldn't have said why. The sound seemed familiar somehow, like a song she'd heard in a dream. Then Evan's voice cut through the air, clear and sharp. "You're saying it wrong." The crowd turned. Leora's heart dropped into her stomach. Her son stood in the front row, his small frame dwarfed by the adults around him. His face was pale, his expression distant, as if he were listening to something no one else could hear. Professor Vance's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon?" The third phrase, Evan said, his voice steady and strange, older than his years. "You're emphasizing the wrong syllable. It should be Marthelvan, not Emivarthelvan. And the vowel sound is wrong. It's softer. Like this." He spoke the words, and the air seemed to change. Leora couldn't explain it. The temperature didn't drop, exactly, but something shifted. The quality of light, the weight of sound. Evan's pronunciation carried an accent that felt ancient, as if the words themselves remembered being spoken by different lips in a different age. The crowd fell silent. Someone's phone slipped from their hand and clattered on the ground. Professor Vance stared at Evan, his face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something else, something hungry.
"How?
How do you know this?" Evan blinked, and suddenly he was just a kid again, looking confused and slightly embarrassed. "I don't know. You were saying it wrong." It hurt to hear. Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. Someone muttered about precocious children. But Vance wasn't laughing. He descended from the stage with surprising speed, his eyes locked on Evan. "What's your name, son?" "Evan." He glanced back toward the cafe booth, looking for his mother. "Evan Chun." Leora was already pushing through the crowd, her heart hammering. She reached Evan and pulled him close, feeling the tension in his small shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said to Vance, forcing a smile. "He's very interested in languages. Sometimes he gets carried away." "No," Vance grabbed her arm, his grip too tight. His eyes were fever-bright. "No apology necessary. Where did he learn this? Do you have recordings? Books? This is extraordinary. This is impossible." "I don't know what you're talking about." Leora pulled free, her protective instincts flaring. "Come on, Evan." "Please." Vance followed them, fumbling for a business card. "I must speak with him. Record his voice. This could change everything we know about." "We're not interested." Leora's voice was firm now, the voice she used when drunk customers got too friendly at the diner where she worked weeknights. "Have a good day, Professor." She guided Evan back toward their booth, feeling dozens of eyes tracking them. The crowd was already buzzing, phones out, probably posting about the weird kid who'd corrected a Yale professor.
"Great.
Just what they needed.
Mom, I'm sorry," Evan whispered.
"I didn't mean to make a scene." The words just came out. "It's okay, baby." She squeezed his hand. "Let's pack up early. I think we've had enough excitement for one day." But as they began breaking down the booth, Leora felt it again, that cold brush against her skin, like being watched by something that didn't breathe. She turned, scanning the thinning crowd. In the shadow between two tents, a man stood perfectly still. He was tall and lean, dressed in dark clothes that seemed to drink in the late afternoon sun. His skin was pale, not sickly, but luminous, like marble. And his eyes, even from a distance, were the strangest color she'd ever seen, silver gray, like ash after a fire has died. He was staring directly at Evan. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Leora felt her breath catch. There was something in his gaze, recognition, wonder, and an emotion she couldn't name. Something ancient and profound. Then someone walked between them, and when they passed, the man was gone. Leora shook her head, trying to clear the sudden fog in her thoughts. Too much sun. Too much stress. She was seeing things. "Mom?" Evan tugged her sleeve. "That man in the black coat. Did you see him?" Her blood turned to ice. "What man?" "The one who was watching us." Evan pointed to the empty space between the tents. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I've seen him before. In my dreams." Leora pulled Evan closer, her hands trembling as she finished packing. The festival suddenly felt dangerous, the cheerful music too loud, the crowd pressing too close. She didn't know it yet, but everything had just changed. In the shadows, Kale smiled for the first time in 300 years. The Echo bloodline lived. Kale hadn't felt his heart race in centuries. He'd almost forgotten the sensation, that electric surge of adrenaline, the sharp clarity that came with genuine shock. Vampires didn't experience surprise often. When you'd lived through the fall of Rome, the Black Plague, 2 world wars, very little remained unexpected.
But this
was impossible. He pressed himself deeper into the shadow between the tents, his enhanced senses tracking every movement of the woman and child as they packed up their booth. The boy, Evan, she'd called him, looked so ordinary. Sneakers with untied laces. A faded Captain America t-shirt. Messy dark hair that kept falling into his eyes. Ordinary, except for the words that had just poured from his mouth.
"Martelban Sarai Doctun."
The phrase echoed in Kale's memory, perfect and pure. He hadn't heard those words spoken correctly in over 2,000 years. The last time had been in the throne room of the House of Dawn, moments before his father, the Vampire King, had been burned alive by human crusaders who'd learned too many of their secrets. The Dawn Tongue had died with his bloodline, or so Kale had believed. The language wasn't just communication. It was power, sound woven with intention, syllables that could command reality itself. His ancestors had used it to raise wards, seal enemies in eternal sleep, even bend the will of lesser beings. It was why humans had feared them, why they'd hunted vampires to near extinction. For millennia, Scholars had found fragments of the Dawn tongue in ruins and ancient texts, but the pronunciation had been lost. The accent, the tonal patterns, the breath between words, all of it crucial, all of it gone. Without those elements, the words were just noise. Until today. Until a 10-year-old human child had spoken them as if he'd been born to it. Cale's fingers dug into the tent pole, splintering the wood. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to think. The Echo bloodline. It had to be. 3,000 years ago, when vampires had walked openly among humans, his grandfather had formed an alliance with a human family, the Echoes. They'd been blessed with a gift, the ability to remember and speak any language perfectly, to preserve vampire history and sacred texts. In exchange, the House of Dawn had protected them, given them wealth and status. But when the war came, when humans turned against vampires, the Echo family had vanished. Some said they'd been killed. Others claimed they'd betrayed the vampires, taken the knowledge, and hidden it away. Cale's father had died believing they were extinct. Yet here stood proof. A child who spoke the Dawn tongue with an accent that predated written history. Cale watched as Leora, the mother, glanced nervously around the festival grounds. She was afraid. Good. Fear would keep her vigilant. The way Professor Vance had looked at her son, with that hungry academic obsession. Cale had seen that look before. It never ended well. The professor was already circling back, pretending to browse a nearby booth while watching the cafe stand. His phone was out, presumably texting someone. Cale's enhanced hearing caught fragments. Extraordinary fine must acquire samples potential for. Foolish human. He had no idea what he'd stumbled onto. But others would. Word would spread. That video someone had recorded was probably already online, spreading through academic circles and darker corners of the internet. Places where old vampires like Cale kept watch for signs of their lost heritage. He pulled out his own phone, a necessary concession to modern life, and opened an encrypted app. 3 messages already waited. Soren_Lord. Did you hear the broadcast from Chicago? Dawn tongue. Authentic. Soren_Lord. I want the source. Name your price. Soren_Lord. Respond immediately, or I'll consider you an obstacle. Cale's jaw tightened. Lord Soren. Of course, he'd already heard. The bastard had spies everywhere, and an insatiable hunger for power. He led the Crimson Court, a coven of vampires who'd spent centuries searching for any remnant of the Dawn tongue, believing it could restore vampires to their former glory. Soren would kill for this. Kill anyone who stood between him and that child. Cale deleted the messages without responding. He'd dealt with Soren before. The vampire lord was cunning but arrogant. He could be managed.
For now.
The real problem was protecting the boy until Cale understood what he was dealing with. Was Evan aware of his heritage? Did the mother know? The way she'd pulled him away from Vance suggested instinct more than knowledge, but Cale needed to be sure. He watched them finish packing. The sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. In another hour, full darkness would fall, and Cale's powers would strengthen. He could move freely then, unseen, following them home. The mother hoisted a box of supplies, and Evan grabbed a bag, chattering about something, probably still confused by what had happened. They looked so normal, so vulnerable. Cale felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Protectiveness. He hadn't felt that in God, since his sister had died in 1347, victim to a plague even vampire blood couldn't cure. He'd sworn then never to care for anyone again. Caring meant loss. Loss meant pain. But watching this child, this impossible, miraculous child who spoke his ancestors' tongue, Cale felt something shift in the frozen wasteland where his heart used to be. The Echo bloodline lives, he whispered to the shadows. After all this time, a vendor walked past, and Cale used the moment to slip away, melting into the growing darkness between tents. He'd follow them home, learn their routines, build a perimeter. Because Soren wouldn't wait. Vance wouldn't stop digging. And there were older things than either of them. Ancient vampires who remembered the power of the dawn tongue, who dreamed for millennia of hearing it again. They would come for Evan Chin. But they'd have to go through Kale first. And Kale hadn't survived 3,000 years by being merciful to his enemies. He glanced back once more. Evan was laughing at something his mother said, the strange intensity from earlier completely gone. Just a kid. Just a normal, innocent kid. Who held the key to resurrecting a language that could reshape the world. Sleep well tonight, Kale murmured. It may be your last peaceful night for a very long time. Professor Jonathan Vance couldn't stop his hands from shaking as he rewound the video for the 37th time. His office at the university felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in as that child's voice filled the speakers again.
Martelban sarai docton. Perfect. Impossible. Perfect.
He dedicated his entire career to the Dawn tongue, 23 years of research, 5 published books, countless lectures. He'd reconstructed grammar patterns from pottery shards, traced linguistic evolution through 12 dead civilizations, and become the world's foremost expert on a language no one had heard in 2 millennia. Except he'd been wrong. About everything. The pronunciation, the tonal structure, the breath patterns, all his careful academic work had been nothing but educated guessing. And a 10-year-old child had just proven it in front of 200 witnesses. Vance slammed his fist on the desk. His coffee mug jumped, spilling dark liquid across his notes. He didn't care. Evan Chun, he muttered, pulling up the festival's vendor registration database he'd sweet-talked the organizer into sharing. Leora Chun, mother. Address: 847, Maple Grove Avenue, apartment 3B. He copied the information into his private notebook, the leather-bound one he kept separate from his university work. The one filled with references most academics would consider fringe at best, insane at worst. Because Vance had a secret. He didn't just study dead languages.
He studied why they died.
And the Dawn tongue hadn't simply faded away like Latin or ancient Greek. It had been actively destroyed, systematically erased from human record by forces Vance had spent the last decade trying to understand. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and withdrew a folder marked classified, "Do not file." Inside were photocopies of manuscripts he'd stolen from private collections, blurry photographs of cave paintings he wasn't supposed to know existed, and testimonies from 3 different consultants who'd all vanished within months of speaking with him. All of them pointed to the same conclusion. The Dawn tongue had belonged to vampires. Real vampires. Not the Hollywood version, but something far older and more terrifying. Beings who'd ruled from the shadows, whose language could bend reality, who'd been hunted nearly to extinction by human crusaders who'd feared their power. Vance had been called crazy by colleagues who'd glimpsed his theories. He'd been denied tenure twice, forced to rebuild his reputation from scratch with more acceptable research. But he knew. He'd always known. And now he had proof. A child who could speak their language. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Professor Vance? The voice was smooth, cultured, with an accent Vance couldn't quite place. European, maybe. Very old money. My name is Lord Soren. I believe we have a mutual interest. Vance's mouth went dry. Who is this? How did you get this number? I watched your presentation today. Rather, I watched the boy who corrected you. Remarkable, wouldn't you say? Every instinct screamed at Vance to hang up. But curiosity, that fatal academic curse, kept the phone pressed to his ear. What do you want? The same thing you want, Professor. Knowledge. Understanding. Perhaps. More a pause. I represent certain parties who've been searching for someone with the boy's gifts for a very long time. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation for information. I don't sell out my research subjects. Soren laughed, a sound like silk over razor blades. Come now, Professor. Your career has stalled. Your theories are ridiculed. But imagine genuine proof of the Dawn tongue. Articles in every major journal. Your name in history books. All we need is access to the child. just for a few tests. Recording sessions. Nothing harmful. Vance's heart hammered. Everything he'd ever wanted. Offered on a silver platter.
Fame.
Vindication. Proof that he'd been right all along. How do I know you're legitimate? He asked carefully. Because I can tell you things about the Dawn tongue your 20 years of research never uncovered. For instance, did you know the language has 7 tonal layers, not 4? That vowel length must match the speaker's heartbeat? That certain phrases require, Soren paused, non-human anatomy to pronounce correctly? The air left Vance's lungs. You're one of them. A vampire. How wonderfully direct. Yes, Professor. And unlike you, I actually remember when the Dawn tongue was spoken daily. I remember what it could do. What it could do again with the proper guidance. Vance stood, pacing his office. His reflection stared back from the darkened window. A desperate man in a rumpled suit, hair graying, career dying, obsessed with proving everyone wrong. What exactly are you proposing? Simple cooperation. You provide the boy's location and access to him. We conduct our research, carefully, humanely. You get to publish the findings under your name. Everyone benefits. And the boy will be treated as the treasure he is. I give you my word. The word of a vampire. Vance knew enough mythology to know how much that was worth. But the alternative was returning to his stale office, his mocking colleagues, his irrelevant research. Dying unknown, his theories buried with him. The mother won't agree to testing, Vance said slowly. She was very protective. Mothers can be persuaded or circumvented. Leave those details to me. All I need is the address. Vance looked at his notebook. 847, Maple Grove Avenue, apartment 3B. His finger hovered over the numbers. This was wrong. He knew it was wrong. But when had playing by the rules ever gotten him anywhere? When had being ethical and patient and respectful of boundaries earned him anything but contempt? If anything happens to that child, you have my complete assurance, Professor. We simply want to understand his gift. As do you. Vance closed his eyes, made his choice, sold his soul. 847, Maple Grove Avenue, he whispered. Apartment 3B. Excellent. We'll be in touch, Professor. Your contributions to science will be remembered. The line went dead. Vance sat in the darkness of his office for a long time, staring at his hands. They'd stopped shaking. He felt calm now, purposeful. He was going to be famous. He just had to ignore the small voice in his head that sounded like his conscience, screaming that he'd just condemned an innocent child. Outside his window, something moved in the shadows between buildings. Watching. Waiting. The hunt had begun. Evan woke to the sound of his own voice. At first, he thought he was still dreaming. One of those strange, vivid dreams where you're aware you're asleep, but can't quite pull yourself awake. In the dream, he'd been standing in a vast hall made of black stone, torches burning with silver flames that gave no heat. A man in ancient armor had been teaching him words, making him repeat them until his throat ached. But now he was awake, sitting upright in bed, and the words were still coming out of his mouth.
Gautai mozum sevei. Corantoshvel dominae.
Sethralka mortum. His lips moved without his permission, shaping sounds he didn't understand. His voice was different, deeper, resonant, like it was coming from somewhere beyond his chest. The syllables rolled out in perfect rhythm, each one precise and heavy with meaning he couldn't grasp. Evan tried to stop, tried to clamp his mouth shut, but the words kept flowing, unstoppable as a river. The temperature in his bedroom plummeted. His breath misted in the air. Frost began creeping across his window in delicate, branching patterns, but not random patterns. Shapes, symbols, complex geometric designs that hurt to look at, that seemed to fold in on themselves in ways that didn't make sense. The lamp on his nightstand flickered.
Once. Twice.
Then exploded in a shower of sparks. Evan gasped, finally breaking the flow of words, and scrambled backward against his headboard. His heart thundered in his chest. What was happening? What was wrong with him? Mom, he tried to yell, but his voice came out as a whisper. The frost symbols on the window pulsed with faint blue light. They looked almost alive, writhing and reforming. And now that the words had stopped, Evan could feel something, a presence, like being watched by 1,000 invisible eyes. His bedroom door flew open. Leora stood there in her pajamas, hair wild, eyes wide with panic. Evan, I heard. She stopped, staring at the frosted window, at the darkness where his lamp had been, at her son pressed against the headboard with terror written across his face. What happened? I don't know, Evan's voice shook. I was asleep, and then I was talking, but I couldn't stop. Mom, I couldn't stop the words. Leora rushed to him, pulling him into a fierce hug. She was shaking too. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Just a nightmare. Look at the window, Evan whispered. Leora turned. In the streetlight's glow, the frost patterns were clearly visible, intricate symbols that definitely weren't natural ice formation. They covered the entire window in a mandala of impossible geometry. Oh God, Leora breathed. She grabbed her phone from her pocket, hands trembling as she turned on the flashlight. The beam swept across the window, illuminating the symbols more clearly. They were beautiful and terrible, ancient and purposeful. Evan touched her arm. Mom, what's happening to me? Leora had no answer. How could she? Her son was 10 years old. 10-year-olds got good at math, or learned piano, or played Little League. They didn't spontaneously speak in dead languages and make frost appear on windows in October. We need to, she trailed off, unsure. Call a doctor? And say what? My son is possessed by ancient languages? Call the police? They'd think she was insane. We need to document this. She took photos of the window, of the room, her hands still shaking. Evidence. In case. In case what? In case someone tried to say she was crazy? In case Evan needed medical help and doctors didn't believe her. Don't touch the symbols, she said, pulling Evan away from the window. We don't know what they. A knock at the front door made them both jump. Leora's blood turned to ice. It was 2:47 a.m. Nobody knocked at 2:47 a.m. with good intentions. Stay here, she whispered to Evan, grabbing the baseball bat she kept in the closet, a holdover from their first apartment in a bad neighborhood. Lock the door behind me. Mom, don't. Lock it, Evan. She crept down the short hallway to their apartment's front door, bat raised. Through the peephole, she saw a man standing in the dim corridor light. The man from the festival. The one in the dark coat. Leora's grip tightened on the bat. How had he found them? What did he want? Mrs. Chun, his voice was calm, quiet, but it carried clearly through the door. My name is Kale. I'm not here to hurt you, but you need to let me in. Your son just activated a ward seal, one that hasn't been triggered in 2,000 years. Others will have felt it. They're coming. Go away, or I'm calling the police. Please, something in his voice, urgency, but also an odd gentleness. Look at your son's window. Look at the symbols. You know that's not normal. You know something is very wrong. I can explain. I can help. Leora's mind raced. This stranger somehow knew about the symbols. Knew about Evan. But how? How did you find us? I followed you from the festival. I've been watching your apartment since sunset, making sure no one else approached. When I felt the ward activate, I knew there wasn't much time. Ward? What are you talking about? The symbols on your son's window are royal seals of the House of Dawn. They haven't appeared in this world since my family was murdered 2 millennia ago. Your son isn't just speaking a dead language, Mrs. Chen. He's channeling power older than Christianity. And there are things out there, very dangerous things, that will kill to possess that power. Leora stood frozen, bat shaking in her hands. Behind her, Evan's door opened. Her son stepped into the hallway, his face pale but calm. Mom, he said quietly. I know him. From my dreams. The Crimson Lake. He was there. Kale's voice softened through the door. Hello, Evan. It's been a very long time. Leora looked at her son, at the strange knowing in his young eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. She opened the door. Kale stood motionless in the doorway, hands visible and empty, making himself as non-threatening as a 6-foot vampire could manage. Up close, Leora could see details she'd missed at the festival, the unnatural stillness of his posture, the way shadows seemed to cling to him, the silver-gray eyes that reflected light like an animal's, and the fact that he cast no reflection in the hallway mirror behind him. "You're going to want to sit down for this conversation," Kale said softly. Leora kept the bat raised. "You have 5 minutes. Then I'm calling the police." "The police can't help you with what's coming." Kale's gaze shifted to Evan, and something ancient and sad crossed his face. "But I understand your fear. May I come in? I promise on my family's name, what's left of it, that I mean you no harm." There was something in his voice, a bone-deep weariness that spoke of centuries carrying weight. Against every instinct, Leora stepped aside. Kale entered slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. He glanced around the small apartment. The worn couch, the photos on the walls, the stack of library books on the coffee table. His eyes lingered on a framed picture of a man in his 30s, dark-haired and smiling. "Your husband?" he asked. "My late husband," Leora's voice was steel. "He died 7 years ago. So, if you've done research on us." "I haven't. I can simply see the grief in how you keep his photo central." "And the boy has his eyes." Kale turned to Evan, who stood in the hallway, watching with uncanny calm. "What do you remember from your dreams, child?" Evan stepped forward. "A lake. Red water, but not blood, something else. You were standing at the shore and you were
sad.
So sad it made my chest hurt. You said, 'The dawn no longer speaks.'" Kale's composure cracked for just a moment. His jaw tightened, and he looked away. "The Lake of Memories. I haven't thought about that place in, God, 800 years. What are you?" Leora demanded. "And what do you want with my son?" Kale met her eyes. "I'm a vampire, Mrs. Chen. 3,000 years old. Give or take a few decades. And I don't want anything from your son. I want to protect him." Leora laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "Vampires aren't real. The symbols on your son's window would suggest otherwise. As would the fact that he can speak the Dawn tongue, a language that died with my people millennia ago." Kale moved to the window, studying the frost patterns without touching them. "These are royal seals. My family's seals. They mark boundaries, declare sovereignty, warn enemies away. Your son created them unconsciously while channeling power he doesn't understand." "That's insane." "Is it?" Kale turned back to her. "More insane than your 10-year-old perfectly pronouncing a language no human should know? More insane than frost appearing in October?" "Mrs. Chun, I understand this is difficult. But we don't have time for skepticism. Right now, every vampire old enough to remember the Dawn tongue is feeling what your son just did. They'll come looking." Evan spoke up, his voice small. "What am I?" Kale's expression softened. He crossed the room and knelt before the boy, bringing himself to eye level. "You're human, Evan, but not ordinary. You're descended from a bloodline called the Echoes, humans who were blessed 3,000 years ago with the gift of perfect linguistic memory. Your ancestors served my family, preserving our history, our sacred texts. They could hear any language once and speak it flawlessly for the rest of their lives." "Like a superpower?" Evan asked. "Precisely like that. But more than just memory, you can channel the essence of language itself. The Dawn tongue isn't merely words. It's power given form, command made sound. When spoken correctly, it can shape reality." Leora sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly weak. "This can't be happening." "I know this is overwhelming," Kale said, standing. "But I need you to understand the danger. There was a vampire at the festival today. I felt his presence but couldn't locate him in the crowd. His name is Lord Soren, and he leads a coven called the Crimson Court. They've spent centuries searching for any remnant of the Dawn tongue. If they learn about Evan, they already know. The words fell like stones. That professor,
Vance.
he was so insistent about recording Evan's voice. He followed us to the parking lot before we managed to lose him. Cale's face darkened. Jonathan Vance. Yes, I know of him. He's been circling vampire history for years, digging where he shouldn't. If Soren has made contact with him, he pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. We need to move you. Tonight. Move? We're not going anywhere with you. We don't even know you. Mom, Evan's hand found hers. I trust him. I know that sounds crazy, but in my dreams, he's always protecting something. Always standing guard. He's not the scary one-inch. Cale looked at the boy with something like wonder. The dreams. Your bloodline must be stronger than I thought. Echo descendants sometimes experienced visions, genetic memory passed down through generations. You're seeing fragments of my past. The throne room, Evan whispered. Fire everywhere. People screaming. You were trying to save someone, but you couldn't reach them. Cale's hand tightened on his phone. My sister. She was 12. Human crusaders burned our palace while the sun was high. I couldn't. I was too weak in daylight. His voice cracked slightly. That was 1,347 years ago. Silence fell over the apartment. Outside, a car alarm went off, sharp and jarring in the night. Cale's head snapped toward the window. That's not a car alarm. That's a distraction. What? The apartment's lights died. All of them, simultaneously. Emergency lighting flickered on in the hallway outside, casting everything in sickly yellow. Cale moved to the window in a blur of motion, peering into the street below. His voice dropped to a growl. They're here. 3 of them, maybe 4. Soren works fast. Leora grabbed Evan, pulling him close. What do we do? Cale turned, and in the dim light, his eyes had changed, brighter silver now, almost glowing. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made her spine straighten instinctively. You run. 3 hours earlier, Professor Vance had received an address. Not Leora's apartment, he already had that. This was different. A warehouse on the industrial edge of the city, the kind of place that didn't appear on tourist maps. The text message had been simple, come alone. Bring the recordings. We'll discuss terms. Vance had told himself he was still in control. This was just a meeting, a negotiation. He could still back out if things felt wrong. But the moment he stepped into the warehouse, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. The space was vast and empty, lit by a few scattered industrial lights that created more shadows than illumination. In the center stood 4 figures, pale and beautiful and utterly still.
They didn't breathe, didn't fidget.
Just watched him approach with eyes that had seen centuries pass. The tallest one stepped forward, Lord Soren, presumably. He was striking in the way a sword was striking, elegant, deadly, impossible to look away from. His hair was dark as oil, pulled back to reveal features that could have been carved from ice. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Vance's car. Professor Vance, Soren's smile revealed teeth just slightly too sharp. How good of you to join us. Vance's mouth was desert dry. I have the information you wanted. The address, the recordings from today. But I need assurances. Of course, Soren gestured dismissively. Your career will be secured. Papers published in your name. Fame, fortune, all of it. We're quite generous with our collaborators. One of the other vampires, a woman with white blonde hair, circled Vance like a shark. He smells afraid. I like that. Celeste, please. Soren's tone was mild, but the woman immediately stopped moving. Forgive my associate. She has limited social graces. Now, Professor, the recordings? Vance fumbled with his phone, pulling up the video from the festival. His hands shook as he pressed play. Evan's voice filled the warehouse. Marthel van Sarai Dokthun. All 4 vampires froze. Their casual predatory energy vanished, replaced by something deeper. Hunger. Wonder. Ancient longing. Pure, whispered a male vampire with scars across his neck. Untainted by time. How is this possible? Soren's eyes never left the phone screen. Play it again. Vance did. 3 more times. Each repetition seemed to entrance the vampires further. They leaned forward, lips moving silently, trying to match the pronunciation. Learning. Remembering. The boy is untrained, Soren said finally. He speaks from instinct, not knowledge. Which means the bloodline is strong. Very strong, he turned to Vance. You've done well, Professor. The address? Vance recited it, hating himself with each word. But you promised nothing harmful. Just research. Of course. We'll be very careful with him, Soren nodded to the scarred vampire. Marcus, take a team. Acquire the boy. Kill anyone who interferes. Vance's stomach dropped. Wait, no. That wasn't the agreement. You said. I said many things, Soren's smile widened. Did you truly believe we'd let a human profit from this discovery? Professor, you've served your purpose. You should be honored. Your death will contribute to the resurrection of the greatest power this world has ever known. The blonde vampire, Celeste, moved faster than Vance could process. One moment she was across the warehouse, the next she was behind him, her hand on his shoulder, nails digging through his jacket. No. Vance tried to run, but she held him effortlessly. Please, I helped you. We had a deal. Deals are for equals, Soren said, already walking toward the exit. Your cattle, Professor. Useful cattle. I'll grant you, but cattle nonetheless. Be grateful I'm allowing Celeste to make it quick. You can't do this. People know where I am. They'll come looking. Soren paused, glancing back with something like pity. No one knows where you are, Professor. You came alone as instructed. You told no one. Because despite all your research into vampires, you still wanted to believe we operated by human rules. That we valued honor, integrity, fairness. He shook his head. We don't. We value only power. And you just handed us the key to ultimate power. I'll expose you. I'll tell everyone. With what mouth? Celeste whispered in his ear, her breath cold against his skin. Vance's scream died as her hand clamped over his face. He felt her other hand at his throat, not ripping, not yet just pressing. Warning. Soren called back without turning. Keep him alive for now. We may need him to identify the boy if there's any confusion. After that, he waved a hand. Dispose of him as you see fit. The scarred vampire, Marcus, gathered 2 others. The apartment. 847, Maple Grove, apartment 3B. The woman is human untrained. The boy is 10 years old. It should be simple, Soren's eyes gleamed. But there's one complication. Kale is in the city. I felt his presence at the festival. Marcus spat. The lost prince. I thought he'd given up. Kale never gives up. It's his most tedious quality, Soren considered. He's probably already found them. If he interferes, you have permission to destroy him. 3,000 years is long enough for anyone to live. The vampires departed, moving with inhuman speed into the night. Celeste dragged Vance to a corner of the warehouse, zip-tying his hands and feet with casual efficiency. She perched on a crate nearby, watching him like a cat watches a wounded mouse. Please, Vance whispered, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was doing. No, Celeste agreed, examining her nails. But you did it anyway. That's what makes you humans so fascinating. You'll betray anyone, even children, for a taste of recognition, she smiled, showing all her teeth. Don't worry, Professor. When Lord Soren unlocks the Dawn Tongue's full power, your sacrifice will be remembered. Briefly. By me. Before I forget you completely. Vance closed his eyes, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. He'd doomed an innocent child, betrayed a family, all for academic glory that would die with him in this cold warehouse. If he survived this, if by some miracle he survived, he'd spend the rest of his life trying to make it right. But deep down, he knew the truth. There would be no redemption. No second chances. Only darkness and the weight of what he'd done. Cale moved to the apartment door, every muscle coiled. Take Evan to the bedroom. Barricade yourselves. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. What are you going to do? Leora's voice shook. What I was born to do, Cale's expression hardened. Protect what's mine. We're not yours. Your bloodline served my family for 1,000 years. That bond doesn't break just because centuries pass. He glanced back, and his eyes were blazing silver now. I failed to protect my sister. I won't fail again. Now go. Leora grabbed Evan's hand and ran for the bedroom. Behind them, she heard Cale whisper something, words in that same ancient language Evan had spoken. The air pressure changed, making her ears pop. They'd barely shut the bedroom door when the apartment's front door exploded inward. 3 vampires poured through the opening like smoke given form. The first was tall and scarred, moving with military precision. The other 2 flanked him, a young-looking male with dead eyes and a woman whose smile promised violence. Cale, the scarred one said. Still playing guardian to humans? Haven't you learned that lesson yet? Marcus, Cale's voice was ice. Still playing lapdog to Soren? Haven't you learned self-respect yet? Marcus's face twisted. He lunged. What happened next occurred too fast for human eyes to follow. Leora cracked the bedroom door open just enough to see, and immediately wished she hadn't. The vampires moved like lightning given flesh. Marcus swung at Cale's head, but Cale was already gone, appearing behind him to deliver a strike that sent Marcus crashing through the coffee table. The young male vampire tried to flank, but Cale caught his arm mid-swing and twisted. Bones snapped with a sound like breaking branches. The vampire screamed and stumbled back, his arm hanging at an unnatural angle. Amateur, Cale muttered. Soren's really scraping the bottom of the barrel these days. The female vampire hissed and launched herself at him, nails extended like claws. Cale caught her by the throat mid-leap and slammed her into the wall so hard the drywall cratered. Pictures fell, glass shattering. Leave, Cale commanded, his voice resonating with power. Tell Soren the Echo bloodline is under my protection. Touch them, and I'll hunt every member of the Crimson Court to extinction. Marcus rose from the wreckage of the table, blood, dark and wrong-looking, dripping from his mouth. You're outnumbered, Lost Prince. And we have orders. Then you'll die following them. Marcus smiled. Who said we're alone? The bedroom window exploded inward. Leora screamed as glass showered across the room. A 4th vampire, this one impossibly fast, landed in a crouch between her and Evan. Male, young-looking, with eyes like chips of amber. Hello, little Echo, he whispered, reaching for Evan. Leora didn't think. She swung the baseball bat with everything she had. The bat connected with the vampire's skull with a satisfying crack. He staggered, not hurt, but surprised. That moment of hesitation saved their lives. Cale appeared in the bedroom doorway, and the temperature plummeted 20 degrees. His eyes were fully silver now, glowing like molten metal, and shadows writhed around him like living things. Touch.
Them. And.
Die, each word dropped like a hammer blow. The amber-eyed vampire lunged for Evan anyway, and Cale moved faster than wind. He caught the vampire mid-lunge, one hand around his throat, and slammed him through the bedroom wall into the hallway. The impact shook the entire apartment. Cale followed, dragging the vampire through the hole, and Leora heard fighting, terrible, violent sounds of supernatural combat. Marcus and his remaining companion rushed the bedroom. Leora pushed Evan behind her, bat raised, knowing it was futile but refusing to go down without a fight. Marcus's hand shot out and stopped inches from her throat. He couldn't move forward. His face contorted with effort, veins standing out on his pale neck, but something invisible held him back. What? Marcus looked down. Glowing symbols had appeared on the floor, the same patterns that had formed on Evan's window, now burning with blue-white light. They formed a circle around Leora and Evan, an unbreakable boundary. "The boy," whispered the other vampire, backing away. "He's creating wards." Unconsciously, Evan's eyes were unfocused, his lips moving silently. Words in the dawn tongue flowed from him, each syllable strengthening the barrier. Frost spread across the walls in intricate patterns, all radiating from where he stood. In the hallway, Kale hurled the amber-eyed vampire through the front door, or what was left of it. The vampire crashed into the opposite wall of the corridor and slumped, unconscious or dead. Kale stepped back into the apartment, and he looked different now. Older, harder, like something carved from ancient stone and given life solely for war. Blood not his own stained his clothes. "Leave," he said to Marcus and the remaining vampire. "Final warning." Marcus glanced at the ward circle protecting Leora and Evan, at his fallen comrades, at Kale standing between them and their prize. He made a calculation. "Soren won't stop," Marcus said, retreating toward the shattered front door. "He'll send more. He'll send everyone. Let him." Kale's voice was death-given sound. "I've waited 3,000 years for a reason to go to war with the Crimson Court. Tell him he's just given me 1 inch." Marcus and his companion fled, moving with supernatural speed down the hallway and out into the night. Silence fell. The ward circle around Evan flickered and died. He collapsed, and Leora caught him, his small body shaking with exhaustion.
"I'm sorry," Evan whispered.
"I didn't mean to." The words just came. "You saved us," Leora said fiercely, holding him tight. "You were so brave." Kale surveyed the destroyed apartment. Shattered furniture, holes in the walls, glass everywhere. "You can't stay here. Pack what you need. We're leaving."
"Now."
Leora looked up at him, this ancient creature who'd just fought 4 opponents to protect them. His eyes had returned to their normal silver gray, but there was something haunted in them. "Where are we going?" Kale's expression softened slightly. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere even Soren won't find you." He knelt beside them. "I'm sorry it came to this. But Evan is right. The words came to save you. His gift is awakening. And if we're going to survive what's coming, he needs to learn to control it."
"How?"
"I'll teach him." Kale stood, offering his hand. "As my ancestors taught his ancestors. The old ways. The true ways." Leora hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was cool and impossibly strong, but gentle. "Can we trust you?" she asked. Kale smiled, sad and ancient. "Mrs. Chun, 3,000 years ago, I swore an oath to protect the Echo bloodline. I've broken many promises in my long life, but never that 1 inch." Outside, sirens began to wail. Someone had called the police. "Time to go," Kale said. And they ran into the night, leaving their old life shattered behind them. The entrance was hidden behind a false wall in an abandoned subway tunnel, accessible only through a maintenance hatch that hadn't appeared on city maps in 70 years. Kale led them down, carrying their hastily packed bags, while Leora guided an exhausted Evan through the darkness. "Watch your step here," Kale said, his voice echoing off damp concrete. "I see it," Evan murmured, pointing to a step that had crumbled away. "The blue lights show me where to walk." Leora looked where her son pointed. She saw nothing but darkness. "What blue lights?" "The ward markers," Kale explained, glancing back. "His gift is developing faster than I expected. He can see protective enchantments now, something that usually takes years of training." He paused, studying Evan with concern. "How do you feel?" "Tired. And my head hurts. Like there are too many voices trying to talk at once. That's the dawn tongue awakening in your blood. It wants to be spoken. Wants to be used." Kale's voice softened. "I know it's frightening, but I promise, I'll teach you to control it." They descended deeper, the air growing cooler, but somehow fresher. Then Kale touched a section of wall, spoke 3 words in the ancient language, and stone groaned as a doorway appeared where none had existed. Light spilled out, not electric light, but something pure and silver, like captured moonlight. Leora gasped. The sanctuary was vast, impossibly vast for being underground. The ceiling soared 50 feet high, supported by elegant columns carved with flowing script. But it was the walls that stole her breath, floor to ceiling, covering every available surface, were shelves. Thousands upon thousands of shelves, each one holding books, scrolls, tablets, artifacts that gleamed with age and care. "Welcome," Kale said quietly, "to the Library of Two Suns, the last refuge of the House of Dawn." Evan walked forward slowly, his exhaustion forgotten. His eyes were wide with wonder. "It's beautiful. It was built 3,000 years ago by my grandfather. When vampires and humans still worked together, Kale moved through the space with obvious affection, touching spines of ancient books as he passed. Every treaty, every alliance, every piece of knowledge we shared, it's all here, preserved, waiting." The library wasn't just a repository of books. As they walked deeper, Leora saw living spaces carved into alcoves, beds with silk coverings, a kitchen area with modern appliances incongruously nestled among ancient architecture, even a bathroom with running water. "You live here?" she asked.
For the past century, yes.
After I lost faith in trying to integrate with the modern world, Kale gestured to the eastern wall, where a massive stained glass window depicted two suns, one gold, one silver, rising over a city. "My family built this place as a bridge between species. I've maintained it as a monument to what we lost." Evan reached out to touch a scroll on a nearby shelf. The moment his fingers made contact, it began to glow, soft blue light pulsing from the ancient parchment. Kale moved quickly but gently, guiding Evan's hand away. "Careful. These texts are keyed to Dawn tongue speakers. Your touch activates them, brings them to life. But without training, you could accidentally trigger something dangerous." "What would happen?" "Depends on the text. Some contain knowledge. They'd flood your mind with information you're not ready to process. Others contain commands. You might accidentally summon protections or other things." Kale knelt to Evan's level. "Your gift is powerful, Evan. But power without understanding is just chaos." Leora sank onto a velvet couch that probably belonged in a museum, her legs finally giving out. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and creeping terror. "This is insane. This is completely insane. 48 hours ago, my biggest worry was making rent. Now vampires are trying to kidnap my son, and we're hiding in an underground library that shouldn't exist." "I know." Kale moved to an ornate cabinet and withdrew a bottle of amber liquid. "It's overwhelming, but you're safe here. The wards protecting this place were set by the strongest magic users of my bloodline. Not even Soren can break through them, and he's tried." "He's tried." Leora accepted the glass he offered, took a sip, and nearly choked. It tasted like honey and fire. "How many times?" 17 over the past 2 centuries. He's obsessed with the library, with the knowledge it contains. The Dawn tongue in written form is one thing, but the spoken language, properly used, can unlock secrets even I don't fully understand. Kale poured himself a glass, but didn't drink. With Evan's ability, Soren could activate every text here, learn every ritual, every spell, every weapon my ancestors created. He could make vampires the dominant species again. And you don't want that. Kale's laugh was bitter. "Mrs. Chun, Leora, I lived through vampire dominance. I watched what absolute power did to my people. We became monsters. Cruel, careless with human life, convinced of our superiority. The crusades that nearly destroyed us? We earned them." He stared into his glass. "I don't want my people to rule. I want them to survive.
Quietly, carefully,
in balance with humanity, not domination over it." Evan had wandered to a display case containing what looked like a crown, delicate silver worked into the shape of rising suns. He pressed his hand against the glass, and whispers filled the air, voices speaking in the Dawn tongue, layered and harmonious. "That was my father's crown," Kale said softly. He wore it the day he died. I salvaged it from the ashes of our throne room. What are the voices saying? Evan asked. They're reciting the oath of the Dawn Kings. To protect, to preserve, to bridge the day and night. To rule not as gods, but as guardians. My father failed that oath. I've spent 3,000 years trying to honor it. Kale joined Evan at the display. Your ancestors helped create that crown. Echo craftsmen worked with vampire artisans, binding their language gifts into the metal itself. It's why it still speaks. Leora watched them, the ancient vampire and her young son, connected by history she'd never known existed. Why didn't you tell us about this before? Why wait until we were attacked? Because knowing puts you in danger. Ignorance is protection. Kale turned to face her. But that protection is gone now. Soren knows about Evan. The Crimson Court will never stop hunting him. So I'm offering you a choice. What choice? Stay here. Let me train Evan in the old ways. Teach him to control his gift, to defend himself, to understand what he is. It will take months, maybe years. Your old life is over, but you'll be together and you'll be safe. And the alternative? Kale's expression darkened. I try to hide you somewhere far away. You run forever, always looking over your shoulder, while Evan's gift grows wild and dangerous inside him. Eventually, Soren will find you, and when he does, I might not be there to stop him. Leora looked at her son, who was studying the crown with intense focus. 10 years old, still a child, but also something more, something ancient and powerful awakening inside him. If we stay, she said slowly, you promise to keep him safe. On my father's crown, on my sister's memory, on 3,000 years of honor. Kale's eyes met hers. I swear it. Leora took a deep breath, made her decision. Then we stay, and you teach him everything. Lord Soren stood in his penthouse office, 60 stories above the city, and watched the sun rise with the patient hatred of something immortal. The light didn't hurt him through the reinforced glass. Modern technology had its uses, but he still despised it. A reminder of his species' greatest weakness. His phone buzzed. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Tell me you have the boy, Soren said without preamble. Kale was there. Marcus's voice was strained. He destroyed half our team. Thomas won't wake up. The boy created wards, real ones, without training. And Kale. He's protecting them like it's the old days. Like he's still a prince with an army. Soren's grip tightened on the phone. The screen cracked. And where are they now?
Gone.
Vanished. We've searched every property associated with the woman, every known Kale location. It's like they disappeared into thin air. The sanctuary, Soren breathed. He took them to the library of 2 Suns. Of course, he'd spent 2 centuries trying to find that place, following every rumor, bribing every informant. Kale had hidden it too well. What do we do? Marcus asked. We adapt. If we can't take the boy by force, we use leverage. Soren pulled up a file on his tablet, information his people had compiled. The mother has a sister in Boston. Jennifer Chen, age 34, graphic designer. Track her. Don't touch her yet, but make sure she knows she's being watched. And the professor? Soren glanced toward the corner of his office, where Jonathan Vance sat bound to a chair, tape over his mouth, eyes wild with terror. Keep him alive. We may need him to verify the boy's voice on recordings. His expertise could still prove useful. Vance made muffled sounds of protest. Soren ignored him. There's something else, Marcus said hesitantly. We've been analyzing the video from the festival, playing it for some of our older members. Duchess Valeria thinks she recognizes the specific dialect pattern. She says it matches the royal bloodline, the language spoken only by Dawn princes and their designated heirs. Soren went very still. That's impossible. The Echo family served all vampire houses. They weren't exclusive to. Unless they were. Unless the most powerful language, the one that could actually command reality, was kept secret. Reserved only for the highest bloodline. Marcus paused. If this boy can speak the royal dialect, he's not just valuable. He's a key to powers we thought were myths. Soren's mind raced. The legends spoke of things the Dawn Princes could do with their language: reshape flesh, stop time, erase memories on a massive scale. He'd always assumed they were exaggerations. But what if they weren't? Increase the bounty, Soren said. $2 million to whoever brings me the boy alive. $1 million for information leading to Kale's sanctuary. And Marcus? Use Vance's recordings. Play them on every frequency we control. Let every vampire in North America hear that child's voice. Someone will recognize something. Someone will make a mistake. He ended the call and turned to Vance, ripping the tape from his mouth. The professor gasped, tears streaming down his face. Please, I'm sorry, I didn't know. You're going to make another recording for me, Professor. A message will broadcast to Kale and the boy. You're going to beg for your life. Appeal to their humanity, Soren smiled. Even ancient vampires sometimes have soft hearts. And if Kale tries to rescue you, we'll finally discover where he's hiding. They won't come for me. Why would they? I betrayed them. Precisely. Which makes it all the more compelling if they do. Soren pulled out his phone and began recording. Now, Professor. Beg beautifully. Your life depends on it. Meanwhile, in the sanctuary, Evan stood in the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by floating orbs of silver light. Kale had called them resonant spheres, artifacts that responded to the Dawn tongue, showing the speaker where their pronunciation was correct. Again, Kale instructed from the edge of the circle. Focus on the second syllable. It needs to rise, like a question, then fall sharply. Evan took a breath and spoke. Selthera Vencorium. 2 of the 12 spheres glowed brighter. Better than yesterday, when only one had responded. Good, Kale said, though his expression remained serious. You're learning the structure, but you're still thinking of it as language, words with meanings. The Dawn tongue is more than that. It's intention made manifest. You have to feel what you want the words to do. I don't understand. Kale stepped into the circle. When you created those wards in your bedroom, you weren't thinking about grammar or pronunciation. You were terrified for your mother. You wanted protection. The language responded to that need. He placed a hand on Evan's shoulder. That's what you must learn, to channel intention through structure. To want something so clearly that the words have no choice but to obey. Leora watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. They'd been here 5 days now, and Evan was training 8 hours daily. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but also
different.
More focused, like he was discovering something essential about himself. He needs rest, she called out. He's just a child, Kale. He's an echo, Kale corrected gently. And Soren won't wait for him to be ready. Every day we train is one day closer to survival. As if summoned by his name, an alarm began shrieking through the sanctuary, a high-pitched wail that made Evan clap his hands over his ears. Kale's face went pale. Someone's trying to breach the outer wards. He ran toward the library's main chamber, Leora and Evan following. At the center of the room, a massive stone table had lit up, showing a 3-dimensional map of the tunnel system around the sanctuary. Red lights pulsed at 7 different points. 7 breach attempts, Kale muttered. Coordinated. Soren's throwing everything at us. Can they get in? Leora asked, fear sharp in her voice. Not easily. But if they keep trying, if they find the right frequency, Kale's hands moved over the table, adjusting defenses, reinforcing weak points. We have time. Days, maybe weeks. But we can't hide forever. A new alert appeared on the table, not a breach, but a message. Video file, transmitted on vampire frequencies. Kale hesitated, then played it. Professor Vance's face appeared, bruised and terrified.
Kale.
Evan, if you can hear this,
Please. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry for what I did.
Soren has me.
He's going to kill me unless his voice broke. I don't deserve rescue. I know that. But he says if you don't surrender the boy within 3 days, he'll start killing humans. 1 every hour. He'll make it public. Make you responsible. The video ended. Silence filled the sanctuary. Evan's voice was small. Would he really kill innocent people? Kale's expression was carved from stone.
Yes.
Without hesitation. Soren has no conscience.
No merci.
He wants you, Evan. And he'll burn the world to get you. Then I should go. I should. No, Leora pulled him close. We're not giving you to that monster. But people will die because of me. Kale knelt before Evan, his silver eyes intense. People died long before you were born, Evan. Soren has killed for centuries. This isn't your fault, it's his. And we will stop him. But not by surrendering. By fighting.
How?
Leora demanded. You said yourself we can't hide forever. Kale stood, something dangerous and ancient settling into his features. Then we don't hide. We prepare. We train. And when Soren finally breaks through, he looked at Evan. We show him what the Dawn Tongue can really do. Outside, beyond the sanctuary's walls, the assault on the wards intensified. Soren's forces were coming. The blood moon was rising. And war was coming with it. The blood moon rose full and red, casting crimson light through the stained glass windows of the sanctuary. Kale stood before them, watching the lunar eclipse with the grim certainty of someone who'd seen this before. Blood moons amplify vampire power, he explained to Leora, his voice tight. We're stronger, faster, harder to kill. It's when the old covens traditionally went to war, he turned from the window. Soren chose this moment deliberately. He'll throw everything at us tonight. How long until they break through? Hours. Maybe less. Kale moved to the central chamber, where ancient weapons hung on the walls, swords, spears, artifacts humming with dormant power. He selected a blade that gleamed like frozen starlight. I need you to stay with Evan in the inner sanctum. There's a chamber behind the throne room, sealed by 7 wards. He'll be safe there no matter what happens out here. What about you? Kale's smile was sharp and terrible. I'm going to remind Soren why my family once ruled the night. In the training chamber, Evan sat cross-legged, surrounded by 12 glowing spheres. All 12 blazed with light now. 5 days of intensive training had unlocked something in him, not mastery, but understanding. He could feel the language now, sense its rhythms like music in his bones. Kale entered, and his expression softened slightly. How do you feel? Scared, Evan admitted. But also, ready? I don't know how to explain it. The words want to help. They want to protect us. Good. Kale knelt beside him. Evan, I need you to understand something. What's coming tonight? It won't be like the apartment. There will be many of them. Soren's entire court. I'm going to fight them, but if something happens to me, don't say that. Listen, Kale's voice was firm, but kind. If I fall, you'll know. You'll feel it through the wards. They're connected to my life force. When that happens, I need you to do something very difficult. I need you to speak the seal of eternity. He held up an ancient scroll, its edges burned. This phrase will lock the sanctuary completely. Nothing gets in or out for 100 years. You, your mother, you'll be trapped, but you'll be alive. The sanctuary has supplies, water, everything you need. When you emerge, Soren will be dust and you'll be safe. Evan stared at the scroll. But you'll be
dead.
Yes, Kale managed a sad smile. I've lived 3,000 years, Evan. That's more than enough.
But you have your whole life ahead.
Promise me. If I fall, you'll seal the sanctuary. Evan's eyes filled with tears. I promise. Kale pulled him into a brief, tight hug, the first physical affection he'd shown. You're a good kid. Your father would be proud, he stood. Now go to your mother. Don't come out until it's over. The first ward fell at midnight. Kale felt it shatter like glass in his mind, pain sharp and immediate. The outer perimeter breached. He stood at the sanctuary's main entrance, blade in hand, as shadows poured through the tunnel. They came in a wave. 20 vampires, maybe more, their eyes glowing with blood moon fury. Marcus led them, his scarred face twisted with hatred. Last chance, lost prince, Marcus called. Surrender the boy. Soren might let you live. Soren can rot in the sun. Kale raised his blade. Come and die.
They charged.
What followed was carnage. Kale moved like death itself, 3,000 years of combat experience flowing through every strike. His blade sang through the air, severing limbs, finding hearts. Vampire blood, dark as oil, painted the tunnel walls. He was outnumbered 10-1, but they were young and reckless, drunk on blood moon power but lacking his precision. For fell in the first 30 seconds. Then 6 more. But they kept coming. A blade pierced Kale's shoulder. He roared, spun, decapitated his attacker. Another vampire grabbed him from behind. He drove his blade backward through his own torso, impaling them both. The vampire screamed and crumbled to ash. Kale pulled the blade free, ichor dripping from the wound in his shoulder. Is this all Soren sends? He shouted. Children?
Eva fått armies.
Marcus attacked with renewed fury. Their blades clashed, ringing like bells in the confined space. They'd fought before, centuries ago, and Marcus had learned from that defeat. He was better now.
Faster.
But so was Kale. He feinted left, struck right, and opened a gash across Marcus's chest. The scarred vampire stumbled back, one hand pressed to the wound. You can't win, Marcus gasped. Even if you kill us all, Soren has more. Hundreds more. Then I'll kill hundreds, Kale advanced. I have time. The second ward shattered. Kale's knees buckled. 2 wards down meant they were close, too close. And he was tiring. Even vampire endurance had limits. More attackers poured through. Fresh reinforcements. These were older, more skilled. Kale recognized some from centuries past. Vampires who'd once served his family, now corrupted by Soren's promises of power. Traitors, he spat, engaging 3 at once. You swore oaths to the House of Dawn. The House of Dawn is dead, one shouted back. Soren is the future? They pressed him backward, step by step, forcing him toward the sanctuary's heart. Kale's blade was a blur, but for every vampire he felled, 2 more appeared. His left arm hung useless, the shoulder wound refusing to heal. Blood loss was making him dizzy. The 3rd ward fell. Pain exploded through Kale's skull. He dropped to one knee, gasping. Too many. There were too many. Marcus stood over him, blade raised. It's over, lost prince. You fought well, but you always fight alone. That's why you lose. He's not alone. Evan's voice rang through the tunnel, clear, powerful, resonant with something beyond human. Kale's head snapped up.
No.
Evan, I told you to stay. Evan stood at the sanctuary entrance, his mother behind him, terror and determination warring on her face. The boy's eyes glowed with silver light, the same light as Kale's, but brighter, purer. He raised his hands and spoke in the Dawn tongue. The words that came from him weren't the careful phrases Kale had taught him. These were something else, something primal and ancient, drawn from the deepest wells of his bloodline's memory. The language of the first Dawn Kings, when vampires and humans had forged their original pact.
Sit kalan vele memora. To anteum zerai sao katalan.
Light erupted. Every vampire in the tunnel froze. Their eyes went blank, vacant. Marcus's blade clattered to the ground as his hand went limp. Evan continued speaking, each word precise and devastating. The vampires began to collapse, not dead, but empty. Their memories wiping clean, centuries of knowledge erased in seconds. Kale watched in awe and horror. The forgetting. He's using the forgetting. It was a legendary technique, thought lost. The ability to strip memory itself, to unmake a person without killing them. Merciful and terrible in equal measure. When Evan finally stopped speaking, 20 vampires lay unconscious in the tunnel. Their eyes would open eventually, but they wouldn't remember their names, their purpose, or why they'd come here. They'd be blank slates, children in adult bodies. Evan swayed, and Leora caught him. His eyes returned to normal, and he looked terrified by what he'd done. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I couldn't let them kill you. I couldn't." Kale limped forward and placed a hand on the boy's head. "You saved us. All of us." But Marcus was already fleeing, the only vampire who'd been far enough back to avoid the full effect. His voice echoed back. "Soren will hear of this. The boy is more powerful than we thought." Kale knew what that meant. Soren would come himself now. And when he did, it would be the end of everything. 3 days passed in tense silence. The sanctuary's wards held, but barely. Kale spent hours repairing what Soren's forces had damaged, reinforcing weak points, preparing for the inevitable final assault. His shoulder wound had healed, but exhaustion shadowed his eyes. Evan hadn't spoken the Dawn tongue since using the forgetting. He was afraid of it now, afraid of what he'd done, what he was capable of doing. The 20 vampires they'd released near a hospital with no memories, no identities. Blank. Empty. "You gave them a second chance," Leora told him, holding him close in their small chamber. "A life without violence. Without Soren's corruption. That's a gift, baby." But Evan didn't feel like a gift giver. He felt like a weapon. Kale found him in the throne room, staring at the crown that had belonged to the last king. "You're thinking too much," Kale said, approaching quietly. "I erased them. Just deleted who they were." Evan's voice was hollow. "What if I do that to someone by accident? What if I lose control and hurt Mom? Or—" "You won't." Kale sat beside him on the steps leading to the empty throne. "Do you know why? Because you have something my ancestors lost. Conscience. Compassion. They used the Dawn tongue as a weapon because they forgot it was meant to be something else." "What was it meant to be?" "A bridge." Kale gestured to the library around them. "The first Dawn King, Kalthoras, created the language not to conquer, but to communicate. Vampires and humans spoke different languages, not just words, but ways of thinking. We saw time differently, valued different things. The Dawn tongue was supposed to be neutral ground, a way for both species to truly understand each other. What happened? Power corrupted it. My ancestors realized the language could command as well as communicate. They started using it for control. And the Echo family, your ancestors, became complicit. They preserved the knowledge, but stopped questioning how it was used." Kale's expression darkened. "By the time my father wore that crown, the Dawn tongue had become a tool of dominance. The Crusades were brutal, but they weren't unprovoked. We'd earned humanity's fear." Evan touched the glass case holding the crown. "Is that why you've been alone so long? Because you're ashamed?" "Yes," the admission came quietly. "I survived when my family didn't. I should have died in that throne room with them. Sometimes I think I did, just took 3,000 years to realize it. But you saved us. You protected me and Mom. Because I finally had a reason to." Kale looked at Evan with something like wonder. "You speak the Dawn tongue the way it was meant to be spoken. Not as a command, but as a plea. When you used the forgetting, you didn't do it with hatred. You did it with mercy. You gave them peace." Before Evan could respond, alarms shrieked through the sanctuary. But this time they were different. Not the harsh wail of breach attempts, but a deep, resonant tone that made the very stones tremble. Kale stood, face pale.
"No.
It can't be. What is it?" "Someone's using the Dawn tongue against our wards. Someone who knows the royal dialect." Kale ran toward the main chamber, Evan following. They found Leora already there, staring at the stone map table. Every single defensive marker had turned red. The wards weren't being broken. They were being unlocked from the inside. "How is that possible?" Leora demanded. Kale's jaw clenched. "Only someone of my bloodline should be able to speak those commands. Unless—" A voice echoed through the sanctuary, smooth, cultured, amplified by supernatural power. "Hello, cousin." Soren materialized in the main chamber as if stepping through a curtain of shadows. He was alone, but his presence filled the space with suffocating authority. He wore ceremonial armor, black and silver, ancient vampire war regalia, and his eyes burned with blood moon crimson.
Impossible, Kael Breted.
You're not Dawn bloodline. You can't speak the royal dialect. Can't I? Soren smiled, and it was terrible. Did you really think you were the only survivor, Kael? Your father had other children. Bastards, yes. Unacknowledged. But we carried his blood nonetheless. He spoke a phrase in perfect Dawn tongue, and the throne room's lights dimmed. I've spent 2,000 years learning what you squandered. And now, with the Echo Boy's help, I'll finish what our family started. I'll die before I let you touch him. I'm counting on it. Soren drew a blade, twin to Kael's, from the same ancient forge. You always were the noble one, cousin. The honorable prince. It made you weak. Predictable. They collided in a blur of supernatural speed. This wasn't like the battle with Marcus. Soren was Kael's equal, perhaps his superior. They'd been born in the same era, forged in the same wars. Every strike Kael made, Soren countered. Every technique deployed was mirrored and reversed. The sanctuary shook with the force of their combat. Columns cracked. Books tumbled from shelves. Leora pulled Evan back, shielding him with her body. We have to help him, Evan shouted over the chaos. You can't. You're not ready. But Evan was already speaking, words flowing instinctively. He wasn't trying to attack Soren, he was trying to strengthen Kael, to give him power.
Keltoras bel memoria.
Strength of the first king. Light surged into Kael. His wounds closed. His blade blazed with silver fire. For a moment, he had the advantage, driving Soren back, opening cuts across his armor. Then Soren smiled. Thank you, boy. I needed to hear your voice up close. To understand its patterns, he spoke in Dawn tongue, mimicking Evan's exact accent, his tonal structure. Evan's voice died. He clutched his throat, mouth opening and closing, but no sound emerged.
No.
Leora screamed. Kael roared and attacked with renewed fury, but Soren was ready. He sidestepped, grabbed Kael's arm, and with a terrible crunch, broke it. Kael fell to his knees. Soren placed his blade against Kael's throat. It's over, cousin. You fought well. But this is evolution. The old ways die. The new dawn rises. He raised his blade for the killing blow. And Evan, voiceless but not powerless, did something unprecedented.
He sang.
No words, no language, just pure sound, a melody that carried the essence of the Dawn tongue without its structure. It was communication stripped to its core, understanding beyond vocabulary. The crown in the throne room shattered its glass case and flew to Evan's hands. The moment he touched it, power exploded through the sanctuary. Every book, every scroll, every artifact that had lain dormant for millennia blazed to life. The voices of 1,000 Dawn speakers echoed through the chamber, not as commands, but as harmony. Kael felt it too. The weight of his father's crown, his grandfather's wisdom, his sister's last words before she died. All of it flowing through Evan, purifying the language, restoring its original purpose. The boy spoke again, but now his voice carried the weight of 3,000 years. Enough. The single word froze Soren mid-strike. The command didn't erase him or harm him. It simply made him stop. Made him listen. Evan's eyes glowed with power beyond his years. The Dawn tongue was never meant for war. It was meant for understanding.
And I understand you, Soren.
You're angry. Hurt. You want recognition for suffering in my bloodline's shadow. But killing won't heal that wound. Nothing will. He held out the crown, not to keep it, but to offer it. The old ways end tonight. No more Dawn Kings. No more dominance. Just Evan's voice softened. Just people, vampire and human, learning to coexist. Will you help us build that? Soren stared at the crown, at the boy, at Kael kneeling with his broken arm. For one impossible moment, Kael saw his cousin's mask crack.
Saw the pain beneath.
The loneliness. the desperate need for belonging. Then Soren's expression hardened. I'd rather burn. He lunged for Evan, and Kale, despite his shattered arm, threw himself between them. The blade meant for Evan pierced Kale's heart. He gasped, blood on his lips, and smiled at his cousin. Then burn alone, he whispered, and disappeared in a flash of light.
Kale didn't die.
The blade had pierced his heart, should have ended 3,000 years of existence in an instant. But as his blood touched the crown in Evan's hands, something ancient and powerful awakened. The original magic of the House of Dawn, the covenant between vampire and human, sealed in silver and song. Light erupted from the crown, wrapping around Kale's wound. His flesh knitted together, bones realigned. He gasped as his heart began beating again, truly beating, not the sluggish pulse of the undead, but the strong, steady rhythm of life. What? Kale stared at his hands. Color bloomed in his pale skin. Warmth spread through his chest.
I'm alive.
Evan's voice was gentle, exhausted. The crown remembered the first covenant, when vampires and humans were bound together. It chose to honor that bond. Soren stumbled backward, his face twisted with disbelief and rage.
No.
That power was mine. I earned it. He raised his blade again, but his hands were shaking. It was never about earning, Kale said, standing with effort. His voice was different now, warmer, more human. It was about understanding.
You never learned that, Soren.
And that's why you'll always be alone. For a moment, Soren looked lost, a creature caught between eras, belonging to neither. Then his face hardened into a mask of hatred. This isn't over, cousin. I'll return. You'll forget, Evan said quietly. He spoke 3 words in the Dawn tongue, soft, merciful. The forgetting, but gentler this time. Precise. Soren's eyes went blank. The hatred drained from his face, replaced by confusion. He looked around the sanctuary like a child seeing the world for the first time.
Where? Who am I?
His voice cracked. Kale approached slowly, placed a hand on his cousin's shoulder. Your name is Soren, and you're going to have a chance to become someone better. Leora called an ambulance for a confused man found near the old subway station. When they took Soren away, he went docilely, the centuries of violence and ambition erased. Somewhere in a hospital, he would rebuild an identity from scratch. A second chance, a clean slate. 6 months later, the grand opening of the Library of Two Sons drew crowds that stretched around the block. City officials, academics, curious citizens, all gathering to witness something unprecedented. A cultural hall where humans and vampires studied together. Kale, human now, aging slowly but genuinely mortal, stood at the entrance greeting visitors. He'd adapted remarkably well to humanity, eating food, sleeping at night, feeling emotions with an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed him. I'd forgotten what chocolate tastes like, he told Leora last week, tears in his eyes. Forgotten warmth, laughter, hope. Inside the library, the ancient texts had been carefully curated for public access. The dangerous materials remained sealed, but knowledge of vampire history, linguistic evolution, and the true story of the Dawn tongue was finally being shared. Evan stood on a small stage, considerably taller than 6 months ago, but still just a kid. His gift had stabilized. He could speak the Dawn tongue when needed, but wasn't controlled by it. Around him, a dozen students, both human and vampire, listened intently. The Dawn tongue isn't about power, Evan explained, his voice confident. It's about connection. About understanding someone so completely that you can speak their truth back to them. He demonstrated a simple phrase, and musical notes seemed to hang in the air. That's why we teach it as music now. Not commands. Harmony. In the audience, Leora watched with pride that made her chest ache. Her son, her brilliant, brave, impossible son, was changing the world. And somehow, impossibly, they were safe. Professor Vance sat in the back row, taking notes. Soren's people had released him after their leader's disappearance, and he'd spent months in therapy processing his trauma and guilt. He'd resigned from Yale, dedicating himself instead to documenting the library's work. Proper documentation this time. Honest scholarship. When their eyes met, he nodded apologetically. Leora nodded back. Forgiveness was complicated, but they were working on it. After the demonstration, Cale found Evan in the music room, a new addition where students practiced transforming Dawn tongue phrases into piano compositions. The boy was playing something hauntingly beautiful, ancient words transformed into melody. "Your mother and I are very proud," Cale said softly. Evan smiled. "You're basically my stepdad now. You know that, right?" Cale laughed, still getting used to that sensation. "I suppose I am. Strange, isn't it? 3,000 years alone, and now I have a family. Mom says you're taking her to dinner next week. A real date. She told you that." "I have ears," Evan grinned. "It's okay. I like you, even if you're annoyingly overprotective. You turned me mortal and saved my soul, Evan. I'm allowed to be protective." They sat together in comfortable silence, the piano music filling the spaces between words. Outside, dusk was falling, but there was no danger in the darkness anymore. Just the peaceful transition from day to night. From one era to another. In the main hall, Leora unveiled a plaque dedicated to the House of Dawn and the Echo bloodline, bridge builders, memory keepers, and guardians of a shared future. The crowd applauded. Humans and vampires side by side, learning each other's histories, sharing each other's stories. Cale stood at the window, watching the last rays of sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. He placed his hand against the glass, feeling its coolness, its solidity. "The dawn speaks again," he whispered, the same words from 3,000 years ago, but now they carried different meaning. Not the language of kings and commands, but the language of hope, of second chances, of dawn breaking after the longest night. Evan joined him at the window, and together they watched darkness fall, no longer something to fear, but simply another part of the endless, beautiful cycle. Day and night, human and vampire, past and future. Finally, impossibly in harmony. The end.